All right, so before I ask you any serious questions,
Sure.
I would like to know the concept behind your Facebook biography.
My Facebook biography.
Do you remember what you wrote? Or who wrote your biography? Was it an autobiography or?
I probably wrote that.
Okay, let me give you a line from it.
Please do, because I don't remember.
You said his mama, your mother.
Oh.
Okay, you're was a pound of weed, and his daddy was the adult section at Video Plaza.
Video Plaza.
Can you please explain that to me? Because I can tell you're lyrically in tune, but
sure.
I was like, okay.
Well, that actually is a quote. On my second album, District Selectman, I had a skit called King of the Wild Frontier.
Okay.
And a lot of what I do, there's a lot of parody, there's a lot of satire, there's a lot of people don't always know if I'm joking or if I'm serious.
Okay.
And, you know, to me that was just funny. I was like, you know, well, let me put it this way. I enjoy weed, I enjoy porn.
Okay.
I hate to come out swinging frank like that, but you know, I just
Asian or
I don't discriminate.
Okay.
I like all women across the map, but you know, basically, I just do things that are funny to me.
Okay.
You know, and to me at that time, you know, I found that amusing. You know, so there it was. But that's actually part of a skit. It's about maybe a 2 or 3 minute skit. I've got a narrator that does it in a really country tone. It's basically country music in the background. Okay. And you know, I'm talking about you know, being different from the other kids at school, and you know, it in a very, you know, because I do have to tell my real story at some point. But at that point, that album came out about maybe 4 years ago, and I wasn't maybe ready to get completely literal, so I tried to tell my story in just a funny, over the top, you know, kind of ridiculous way. Okay.
So why did you consider yourself different from other children in your school?
Well, for a lot of reasons. I kind of had the misfortune of being a brainiac nerd when it really wasn't cool to be. Okay. And, you know, I went to school in East Tennessee, you know, and, you know, not to brag or anything, but, you know, I mean, I could read from the time I was about 3 years old. You know, I didn't have a lot of friends when I was a kid. You made us feel dumb by the age of 4? So, yeah. Oh, yeah. You listen. Okay, never mind. So, anyway, with that said, you know, I didn't have a lot of other kids to play with when I was growing up. I had a brother and a sister, but I didn't really have a lot of friends. So,
are you the youngest?
I'm the oldest, actually. Yeah, I'm the oldest of 3. So I would occupy myself by like reading the encyclopedia. You know, I occupied myself by learning. You know, whether it was actually learning facts about things or learning to play an instrument or listening to records and dissecting them. You know, I can actually remember, you know, when I was in the 3rd grade, I was in the bathroom. And this other kid, I won't mention his name, but this other kid comes up to me in the bathroom and he's like, "I heard you like to do book reports." And I thought he was being serious. I was like, "Yeah, I'm about to do one about the Battle of BAM!" And he slams my head into the urinal. Oh my God. You know, so I dealt with a lot of intolerant rednecks and, you know, things of that nature who, you know, and you have to understand too, when I was, you know, when I was maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, like, I started growing like rock and roll hair. I was the first kid in my high school to get an earring. You know, I did a lot of things that were just different than what the other kids were. And the kind of area of the country I came from, you know, and they still kind of don't to this day, like, they just didn't really like anybody that was different than they were. So, you know, I kind of stood out in a lot of ways, and, you know, I don't really think I ever stopped standing out. But
okay, well, you said you locked yourself in your room to play instruments. Did you ever take lessons, or did you play by ear? Did you teach yourself?
My father was a fairly decent musician. He played guitar. He could play the piano a little bit. You know, he showed me some things here and there.
Was he in a band, or did he?
No, he just played for fun. And he passed it on. My younger brother actually is like a virtuoso guitar player and teacher as well. So it's definitely in the family, but. Again, you know, growing up in Tennessee at a time, you know, when we were kids, like, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have smartphones, you know, and there's certainly not a lot of stuff to go out and do. So if you don't occupy yourself with something, you know, you're going to go crazy or get into trouble quickly. So, you know, I kind of did do that. You know, music was the one thing that was just fascinating to me. that, you know, I could express myself with, that I could keep myself occupied for hours on end. So yeah, I mean, I just kind of locked myself in my room, listened to records, learned to play instruments, and you know, that was how I kept myself out of trouble.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so you pretty much said your childhood influenced your type of music and what you write about. Was it not until you came to New York where you actually discovered yourself, like, okay, this is exactly what I want to do, this is the type of music I have to play, or is it still like you play different genres?
No, it came before then. I grew up listening to everything from, you know, my dad was into like progressive rock, like Pink Floyd kind of stuff. You know, my mom was into everything from Cat Stevens to Black Sabbath, but you know, and I actually said this in an interview a few weeks ago, when Wu-Tang came out with Triumph, it just absolutely blew me away. That and Public Enemy, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. I actually bought the cassette when I was a teenager, and I played that cassette so many times that the tape actually snapped. I still have it. So, you know, that was what, you know, it was just like a, you know, kind of like, oh, well, because at that point, you know, I was into hip-hop, but I wasn't aware of what its possibilities were. So kind of from that moment on, that was when I was like, well, I can play a whole bunch of different instruments. I could probably make beats, couldn't I? Right. You know, and then that kind of, you know.
Did it enhance when you came to New York?
It did, yeah. Okay. You know, I actually tried to pursue, you know, the quote-unquote music industry while I was still in Tennessee. And, you know, if I'd kept that up, I probably would have starved to death, you know. Not to say that they don't like hip-hop there, because they do, but if you don't fit into one very narrow kind of mold of a particular sound, which isn't the kind of sound that I do, then, you know, very few people are going to pay attention to you, you know. So it got to a point where I was like, you know, if I'm going to make anything of this, I have to go to New York, I have to go, you know, somewhere where I could actually ply my trade. You know, and with New York being the birthplace of hip hop as well, you know, it's like there's no real better place to go for that. So, you know, it was in motion before I came to New York, but New York absolutely made a man of me, one, but also kind of really helped me find my voice. You know, I moved to New York with $80 to my name and a couch to crash on with a girl I was on the outs with. So, you know, from there I had to kind of basically piece it all together. But absolutely, it definitely brought to fruition, you know, what I'd kind of been doing my whole life.
Okay. So. Can you name some artists that you've actually worked with?
Sure. You know, whether producing beats for them, whether as their engineer, or whether, you know, collaborating with them, like actually on a song. Let's see, I've worked with Method Man, Capadonna, Styles P, Fabulous, Smith & Wesson, Rock Marciano. I know I'm forgetting a bunch of people. Reef the Lost Cause, Royce the 5'9". Who else? Papoose. Okay. Sky Zoo. Yeah, a lot of people. You know.
All right, that's good. Okay, so I'm assuming that you may have worked twice as hard as any other person, especially if they're affiliated with a major record label.
Sure.
However, you obviously have worked with a gargantuan amount of artists. You just explained it to me. So what are the challenges or obstacles that you face on a day-to-day basis? Or do you still face this?
I absolutely still do. You know, if anything, when you start to see a little bit of success, it gets harder, because then you've been put into the eye of people, and, you know, you're expected to maintain that, you know, as well as grow. For me, the biggest challenge has always been being independent. You know, because, you know, I've never had any kind of financial backing whatsoever. You know, so whether it's, you know, pressing up your own CDs, whether it's advertising and marketing, whether it's touring, you know, which was one of the big things that really opened up doors for us, was, you know, going out on the road and playing different places. You know, but again, you got to come out of pocket. You know, and this stuff is expensive. You know, it adds up, and there's no, like, you know, somebody who's signed to a major label, they have a parent company. You know, they've got a budget. You know, and they spoon feed you. You know, what you need at the time to shoot your video. You know, to do all that. You know, when you're independent, you have to come up with that on your own. You know, and I would say that, you know, really just not being able to advertise on a national level like, you know, a major label could do. But even beyond that, obviously the money is an issue, but the biggest problem that I run into is not having enough of me to go around. Okay. Meaning, you know, for the stuff that we put out on Space Lab, you know, I generally produce the beats. I'm usually the guy in the studio recording and mixing it. You know, half the time I may be rapping on it. When we play live, I DJ. I book the shows. I manage the actual day-to-day business stuff. You know, keeping a business in order, all the financials, everything like that. You know, I'm the publicist. I'm, you know, literally, you know, kind of a one-man operation on that level.
Are you a control freak?
I'm not a control freak.
Okay.
I'm really not. No, it sounds that way. I'm sure it does. I'm really not a control freak, but I have standards of what I think things should be.
Are you a perfectionist?
I'm actually not. A perfectionist to me is somebody that won't put something out until they've nitpicked it to death. Right. I won't do that. Like, I'm not afraid to just put something out there and let it be what it is, and let the, you know, and if it's not the greatest thing I've ever done, I'll do better next time. You know, I'm not afraid of that, but I am a stickler for, like, things have to, like, when we send out a press release, everything has to. I'm a stickler for spelling, capitalization, good intro paragraphs. You know, a lot of times if I leave it to somebody else, it doesn't always get done the way that it should be. Yeah, of course. So, you know, if I could clone myself a few times, then we'd be in great shape. But you know, I would say the biggest challenge that I face really is just not having enough of me to go around. You know, to where, you know, I've kind of got to handle all the jobs.
Do you believe that where you are currently in your music and being an independent artist, would it allow you to grow internationally superstardom, or?
I don't see myself ever being a Jay-Z, Michael Jackson, you know, or something like that. I don't really desire to be. Okay. You know, my goals, in my opinion, are realistic. Now, when you say international, though, I have always felt that the kind of music that we do would go over tremendously overseas, in Europe, in Asia, in Japan, in places like that, where, you know, they have almost a deeper appreciation for hip hop, to the point, you know, here in New York, like, we're bombarded with it. You know, every day of the week there's 100 shows going on, like, it's just ingrained into our day-to-day. You know, over there, they really appreciate it, you know, to where they come out in droves. They still buy music because they hold art in a higher value than we kind of do over here. You know, I thoroughly believe that, you know, myself and the other artists on our label could graduate to the level to where every time we drop a record, you know, we're selling 100,000 independent. You know, which, you know, $8 to $10 a unit, you know, do the math. Like, that's, you know, that's the thing. It's like, there's serious money to be made independently if you do have a dedicated fan base. You know, our music may never go platinum, and I'm fine with that. But if it sells 100,000, you know, I'm going to be buying my mama a yacht. Like, you know, it's, you know, to me, that is success. You know, if I can make a consistent living making the music that I want to make, performing it for an audience that cares about it, and consistently supports it, then to me, you've made it. Like, you know, there's no, I don't really care much about, like, being on the cover of Entertainment Weekly or paparazzi chasing me while I'm trying to order a sandwich at Subway. You know, I just want to basically do what we're already doing, just do it on a much bigger level, because I think there's a lot of people out there that would enjoy our music. They've just probably never heard of it. You know.
Okay, so obviously your resume is outstanding. So because of your exposure to gifted artists and actually working with them in their own element, in the midst of developing your own music, where do you see yourself in the next year?
In the next year? I hate to kind of answer it like I did the last question, but I really just want, for the first time in my life, like I'm happy. Like I'm happy with where things are going. You know, it's a slow grind sometimes, but it's a consistently uphill grind. You know, I always say that, you know, my ability, like I've made a living in the music industry for, it'll be 5 years this November. You know, and that was really my goal in life, even beyond being a musician. Like I did not want to work for the white man when I grew up. Like I've always felt like if I could be self-employed and put my time and labor and effort into my dream instead of somebody else's, then I've made it. So, you know, this November will be 5 years that I've been able to do that. But it's the sum of its parts. You know, my ability to make a living comes from, you know, the studio time, from engineering, from a little bit of selling records here and there, from selling a beat here and there. You know, I do consultations for artists who are trying to get their copyrights and publishing. You know, the sum of all these different little odd jobs is what, you know, allows me to make a living in my company to stay in business. So it's running at the point now to where I'm happy with how it's going. I just want to build it up, you know. So, you know, there was a time, I never want to speak negatively on anybody, but, you know, there was a time I had to record a lot of whack music, you know, just to pay the bills. Well, and I'll still do that. You got to do what you got to do, you know, and I'll still do that to this day, but there's a much larger percentage of good artists that, you know, day to day pay the light bill like I'm getting to work with. You know, so I definitely would like to get it to the point to where everybody I'm working with is somebody that I enjoy working with. You know, and then like I said from there, like I just want to have more shows, I want to have more releases out there, I want to have a greater media presence, you know, I want to just be able to reach more people, you know, with what we're doing.
Okay, describe the dynamic of Moonshine Burrito.
Moonshine Burrito is a side project. One of the gentlemen in Space Lab, and my longtime friend, is a rapper named Cypherface. He's originally from Tucson, Arizona. You know, he moved here just like I did. And we've been affiliates and worked together for a long time. And he and I had a discussion a while back about two different things. One, about how rap is just not fun like it used to be. Every rapper, you know, whether they're talking about how much money they're making or how much, you know, how many people they killed or, you know, everything like that, like every rapper's got that ice grill. Like people are afraid to smile and laugh anymore. You know, and there was a time in the, you know, quote unquote golden era of hip hop, you could be yourself and people would accept it. So we wanted to do something that was fun. So he and I were talking one day and we made a joke about, well, if we did a side project, what should we call it? Now, I'm originally from Tennessee. That's where the moonshine comes from. He's originally from the desert in Arizona. That's where the burrito comes from. So I just made a joke. I was like, we should call that Moonshine Burrito. And we both just, like we fell over laughing, and then we were like, you know what, that's so crazy that it might just work. So we recorded the album this summer, and it was very liberating because for the first time in making an album, normally, again, not being a perfectionist, like I won't put it out, but I do nitpick over things. Like, you know, this has got to be the best it could possibly be. And for the first time, I just kind of just let it go and was like, you know what, I'm just going to say whatever comes to my mind. Yes, we're making a rap album about moonshine and burritos, but you know what, we can find a way to make this work. And I had so much fun making the record. You know, and just the contagious kind of energy of, you know, not taking yourself too seriously and being able to laugh, that, you know, the videos have done well so far, and, you know, people seem to be digging it. You know, even outside, like I kind of knew that our immediate fan base would dig it, but it's taken on life with people who'd never heard of us before. So, you know, it comes out September 28th, you know, this month, and, you know, I'm looking forward to the world hearing it.
Me too. Okay, so after completing your record and you're relaxing on your off day, are you comfortable with listening to your own music, or do you play something else totally different? Do you want to get away from that for a while?
Usually I play other things. You know, I'm not gonna lie, like there's times I like to vibe out and, you know, feel myself a little bit, you know, and be proud of what we did, but when I'm outside of that, I like to listen to other music, you know. I don't, you know, jock myself like really hard or anything. So no, I would say I mostly listen to other music.
Okay, so on your way home tonight, if you go home tonight, I don't know if you're working over.
Working pretty late. Actually, yeah.
What are you listening to? Are you listening to jazz, blues?
A lot of times, actually, because, you know, for my day job, I listen to rap music at loud volumes. Like that's my day job, right. You know. So I still listen to hip hop in my spare time, but a lot of times, you know, I might listen to. I'm a big fan of Frank Zappa. You know, I like a lot of like fusion jazz type stuff, like Weather Report and, you know, John Coltrane, or, you know, stuff like that. If I've had a long day of being in the studio, when I unwind, I usually like to listen to something instrumental and mellow, and, you know, something that, you know, and I take the F train home too, and that's bad enough. So I like to zone out and relax a little bit, you know, when possible.
All right, so no more serious questions. It's just a little bit of like.
That's cool. I'm enjoying it.
Okay, dead or alive, what artist would you give anything to work with?
Dead or alive?
I'm hoping you say some more.
Okay.
I'll let you know once you say.
He's dead, actually. Curtis Mayfield.
Okay.
Curtis Mayfield is one of my favorite artists of all time. I would love to have Curtis Mayfield sing over one of my tracks.
I was thinking Michael Jackson.
Oh, well, I mean, I think he's on most people's lists.
Okay.
But, yeah.
What is the first album you've ever purchased with your own record you've ever purchased with your own money?
With my own money?
Yes.
Was Lionel Richie Dancing on the Ceiling.
Really?
It was, yes. I had some cassettes and records before that, but it was like my parents got them for me. My parents had a big vinyl. I'm a vinyl collector. Like I got like
my father was
probably like 3,000-4,000 records taking up, you know, crazy space in my apartment and downstairs at my studio. But my parents had a big vinyl collection, and when I was a kid, I used to actually chew on them. Like I would take the record out and gnaw on it, and I think that had some sort of like chemical reaction. I became addicted to records later in life. But so I had my parents' records, and, you know, they bought me, seeing how much I like music, you know, they bought me some stuff. But the first record I ever actually had my own money and went to the store and bought, Lionel Richie. Dancing on the Ceiling.
So were you a fan with like Commodore's Lionel Richie, or like just Lionel Richie?
Later in life, I preferred the Commodore's Lionel Richie, but when I was a kid, it was Lionel Richie.
Okay.
You know.
So my next question is really ironic because you have a Sesame Street watch on. So
I got a great Sesame Street story too.
So
if that's not your question.
I hear word in Yonkers, word on the street, is that you've been sued by a bird. Is that true?
It is.
Can you explain?
Yeah. So, last summer, you know, most of your viewers are probably familiar with sampling, you know, taking, you know, licks and riffs off of old records and reappropriating them to make new music. So, you know, a lot of my music is sample based, because again, going back to, you know, I love records, but even beyond that, I think sampling helps keep older music relevant for a younger audience. So I sample quite liberally in my music, and I've never really sweated it for two reasons. One, because usually I'm not sampling something that's going to be instantly recognizable. You know, I'm not taking like the first 8 bars of Billie Jean and, you know, usually it's rare records and I chop them up and process them, and, you know, it's normally very hard to guess what I sampled. But the other reason I'm too underground for them to ever care. You know, because, you know,
underestimated.
I did. You know, an entertainment lawyer had told me, you know, that you got to sell a certain amount of records for it to be worth their time to take you to court.
Right.
So I just never sweated it. Well, in 2008, I put out an album called District Selectman.
So was it like Sunny Day?
Well, I had a song. Track number 8 on that album is a song called "People in Your Neighborhood," which sampled the Sesame Street song of the same name. And the first verse was about my neighborhood in Tennessee, and the second verse was about my neighborhood in Brooklyn. So that album had been out for 4 years, and it did what it did. I put out a third album. You know, I hadn't really thought about it. Until last summer, one day, I got served with an injunction from the publishers of that song. It was Sesame Street, but it wasn't. It was a third-party publishing company who had bought the rights to that song.
Okay.
So they had found my record because apparently I wasn't as underground as I thought I was.
Which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing.
It's like a catch-22
kind of, yeah. And so, you know, they served me with an injunction. All my music got pulled from iTunes. My distributor at the time ended up dropping me, and it got settled out of court. It did end up costing me some money, but, you know, they weren't able to take me for everything I was worth because the album only sold 2,000 copies.
Okay.
So, you know, when your album only sells 2,000 copies and then there's 18 songs on the record and you're only entitled to 1/18 of that, you know, it's not a huge amount of money. Right. It was a setback, but at the same time, in a way, I kind of was proud of it. Like, I felt like I'd arrived.
Yeah, like, I'm
a real producer now. Exactly. Like, I got, you know.
Once you've been sued, it's like you made it.
Exactly. You know, so of course my mom, you know, has to make a joke about, like, you know, is Grover the prosecuting attorney and things like that. And it was, you mentioned my watch. Oddly enough, a few weeks later, Caesar Van Gogh, one of the artists on my label, was at a fundraiser. And this watch was actually given to him by one of the executives who worked for Sesame Street. And he gave it to me. He was like, this is your consolation prize, you know, for your first sampling lawsuit. So I've worn it ever since.
Okay. Were you ever spoiled by your parents? Are you still?
I was spoiled with love. I was spoiled with encouragement. I was spoiled with being able to be whoever I wanted to be. With money, absolutely not.
Okay.
I'm a poor hick from the sticks of Tennessee. You know?
I say that because I saw a picture on, I think it was Facebook. Your mom sent you peanut butter.
Oh, she made that.
Oh, she did?
She made that herself. Yeah, she, see, that's the thing, you know, I was also taught self-sufficiency. Okay. Because my parents didn't have any money. Okay. But anything they needed, they could make.
Were they born and raised in Tennessee?
Yeah, they were.
Oh, okay.
You know, my father was a mechanical engineer for Philips Electronics. He was never paid what he was worth, but he had the skill set that if you needed something, he could build it. My mom's the same way. Like, you know, so I was taught, you know, very much by my parents, you know, that you can't let not having any money be an obstacle to stop you. You know, because, you know, if it weren't for, you know, they allowed me to have, I don't know what they had to do to put the money together to get me a set of drums when I was in the 6th grade. And how they were able to tolerate me learning the drums in a tiny little rental house is beyond me. But if it weren't for that, like, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. You know, so, you know, I was definitely spoiled with love, encouragement, resourcefulness, and all that, you know. I
think that's fantastic. I think that just humbles you.
Absolutely. I appreciate everything. Like, that's one thing, you know, I'm a lot of things, and, you know, I've certainly got my flaws and my faults and things I shouldn't do, but every day, if at all possible, I take a minute to just look up and say thank you, because, you know, my story could have ended up, you know, a lot different than it did. So I appreciate everything, you know.
I think that was a perfect ending. That was the last question. Thank you. That was